Hey, I'm Alana, and if you're listening to this, it's probably because you love a good family betrayal story. I've got one that'll make your coffee taste a little sweeter and your Monday morning a bit more satisfying. But before we dive in, let me know what time it is, where you're listening from, and whether you're sipping something warm or iced. Now let's get into it. It all started on what should have been a regular Monday morning. I walked into the headquarters of our family's company, Marshall Dynamics, a place I had poured my blood, sweat, and tears into for over a decade. My heels clicked against the polished marble floors, the kind that echo power and purpose. I passed by Jenna, our receptionist, who gave me a tight-lipped smile that felt a bit too forced. I brushed it off, figuring she was just having an off day. The glass doors to the conference room felt heavier than usual. As they swung open, I immediately felt something was off. The room wasn't set up for the standard quarterly review I had prepared for. Instead, it looked like someone had thrown a last-minute Pinterest-perfect celebration. Gold and white balloons formed an arch over the entrance, and a massive banner read, "Congratulations on new leadership." Bouquets of lilies. My mother's favorite sat on the table beside chilled champagne and a tower of fancy cupcakes. I froze for a second, my mind scrambling to make sense of it. The whole board was there, my parents, the CFO, our legal counsel, the head of marketing, all wearing variations of forced smiles, but my eyes locked onto one person. My older sister, Serena, standing at the head of the table, dressed in a perfectly tailored ivory pantsuit, her hair swept back in a severe bun that screamed, "Power move!" I felt my pulse quicken as my mother stepped forward, her eyes sparkling with a barely contained excitement. "Alana, glad you could make it," she chimed. Her voice tinged with the kind of overly bright tone people use when they're trying to mask something. Of course, I managed to reply, slipping into the seat next to my father, whose gaze never quite met mine. I glanced at the agenda I'd printed for this meeting, but it felt suddenly irrelevant. Something told me I was in the middle of a game I hadn't been invited to play. My father stood straightening his tie like he was about to deliver a wedding toast. "Today is a pivotal moment for our company," he began, voice steady, but eyes flicking nervously around the room. "We're proud to announce a new era of leadership for Marshall Dynamics. Serena will be taking over as CEO effective immediately." The room erupted into polite applause. I felt my stomach drop. The air sucked from my lungs as if someone had punched me in the gut. My palms went cold, my mouth dry. I had spent years building this company's foundation, sacrificing weekends, relationships, and more than a few birthdays, all while Serena took credit for projects she barely understood. I forced myself to breathe, my heart hammering in my chest, as Serena stepped forward, soaking in the applause. She flashed a practiced smile, the kind you see on political candidates, just before they give a canned speech. "Thank you all for this incredible opportunity. I promise to steer this company into a brighter future, one that honors our family's legacy." Legacy. The word felt bitter in my mouth. What about my sacrifices, my late nights, the deals I saved at the last minute? I looked to my father, hoping for some sign that this was a joke or a misunderstanding, but he just straightened his tie again, avoiding my eyes. I felt the eyes of the entire board on me, some with thinly veiled pity, others with a hint of discomfort, like they were watching a car crash in slow motion. I caught the eye of Martin, our legal counsel, a man I had worked closely with for years. He gave a quick, apologetic nod before looking away. My stomach twisted. I hadn't just been blindsided, I had been betrayed. Then, as if the gut punch of my sister's sudden coronation wasn't enough, Melissa, our head of HR, approached me, a manila envelope clutched in her perfectly manicured hands. She leaned in, her perfume too sweet, too close. "I'm sorry, Alana," she whispered, sliding the envelope across the polished table. "It's not personal." I stared at the envelope, my name printed neatly across the front in cold, sterile black ink. I didn't reach for. It didn't even blink. My fingers tightened around the armrest of my chair as I felt a wave of humiliation rise in my chest. "It's a formality," Melissa added, straightening up, as if that made her part in this betrayal more palatable. "You've outlived your role. Outlived my role." I felt the world tilt slightly, the sound of clinking champagne glasses and murmured congratulations becoming a distant echo. I managed a stiff nod, forcing myself to stand. I took the envelope, my movements mechanical, and walked out without a word, heels clicking against the marble like the ticking of a countdown. I didn't cry. Not in front of them. They didn't deserve to see me break. As I pushed through the glass doors, the cool air of the hallway hit me, grounding me for a second. But as I reached the elevator, the weight of the betrayal crashed down. My fingers shook as I hit the button, the soft ding of the arriving elevator sounding more like a funeral bell. As the doors slid shut, I caught a glimpse of the room behind me. My family, my so-called team toasting my sister's triumph. The bile rose in my throat and I swallowed it down, jaw tight, pulse pounding in my ears. They thought they had won. They thought I would just walk away, but they had forgotten one crucial detail. I never forget, and I never forgive. I didn't sleep that night. I paced my apartment, my mind replaying every moment I had spent building martial dynamics. Every late night, every crisis averted, every sacrifice, I felt like I had been erased, like my name had been scrubbed from the family history. Around 3 a.m., I found myself standing in my home office, the faint glow of my laptop screen casting long shadows on the wall. I pulled up old emails, scanned through contracts, and flipped through my dusty filing cabinet. I needed to understand how they had cut me out without a single warning. That's when I found a folder I had forgotten I even kept. It was labeled contingency. I hadn't touched it in years, but the moment I opened it, I felt a chill run down my spine. Inside was a copy of a legal document, something I had signed with my father years ago when we first incorporated the company. I had almost forgotten about it, buried beneath years of loyalty and trust. The document was a partnership agreement outlining the original ownership structure. It clearly stated that I held a 25% stake, non-dilutable unless I voluntarily resigned or sold my shares. I felt my heart rate spike as I read the clause again. The ink still crisp, my signature strong and confident beside my father's. My pulse raced as I pieced it together. They hadn't just ousted me, they had tried to erase my legacy, assuming I wouldn't remember my own rights. They had counted on my loyalty, my blind trust, my willingness to put family before everything. But they had underestimated me. I sat back in my chair, letting the weight of the discovery sink in. This wasn't just about a title. They had stripped me of my work, my identity, my sense of purpose. But more than that, they had betrayed me. I reached for my phone and dialed the one person I knew I could still trust, Javier, the company's head accountant. He had been with us from the beginning. A quiet but sharp-eyed man who knew every dollar that flowed through the company. Javier Purser whispered into the phone, my voice shaking but resolute. "I need you to meet me, now." He hesitated for a moment, then agreed, his voice low and cautious. We met at a 24-hour diner, the kind of place where no one asks questions if you order black coffee at 4 a.m. Javier slid into the booth across from me, his tie still in place but his eyes red from lack of sleep. I pushed the document across the table, watching his face as he skimmed it. His eyebrows lifted and he let out a slow, controlled breath. "They never revoked this," he whispered, eyes wide as he glanced up at me. "No?" I replied, a bitter smile creeping onto my lips. "And they never expected me to remember it." He leaned back, rubbing his temples. "Alana, this changes everything. They've been moving assets, shifting accounts, they're consolidating power like you never existed." I felt my pulse spike again. "How long?" "Months," he admitted, his eyes avoiding mine. "They started right after you took that leave last year." "Of course." The time I had taken off to recover from surgery, I had thought I could trust them to keep things running smoothly while I focused on my health. I had been so naive. I clenched my jaw, the anger simmering beneath my skin like a live wire. "Javier, I need you to pull every financial record from the past 2 years. I want to know every dollar they've hidden, every deal they've signed without my knowledge." He hesitated, glancing around the empty diner before leaning in closer. "Alana, this could get messy. They'll come for you." Hard. I met his gaze, my voice steady for the first time that night. "Let them. They should have thought about that before they tried to erase me." Javier gave a slow nod, his face a mix of fear and respect. "All right, I'll get you everything, but be careful they play dirty." I slid the folder back into my bag, my fingers tightening around the leather strap. "So do I." As I drove back home, the first hints of dawn breaking over the Houston skyline, I felt something shift inside me. The fear was still there, coiled tight in my chest, but so was something else, a spark, a flicker of the fire they had tried to snuff out. They thought they had buried me, forgotten me, erased me. They were wrong. I pulled into my driveway, the cool morning air washing over me as I stepped out of my car. I looked up at the pale, early light cutting through the clouds, a new resolve hardening in my chest. If they wanted to rewrite the story of martial dynamics, I would make sure my chapter was the one they never forgot. By the next morning, my fear had hardened into something colder, sharper. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was ready. They had tried to erase me to cut me out of my own legacy, but I had the one thing they didn't expect to plan. I spent the day combing through every piece of documentation I could find. Old emails, bank statements, contracts. I made copies, highlighted suspicious transactions, and bookmarked financial reports that no longer matched my memory. My home office slowly transformed into a war room. Sticky notes plastered across the walls, folders stacked in precise towers, and my laptop humming with the weight of too many open spreadsheets. Just before noon, my phone buzzed. It was Javier. "I've got something?" He said, his voice a low, urgent whisper. "Meet me at the old place." The old place was a small coffee shop near the university where we used to meet when the company was just a dream. Back when my father still believed in my potential. I threw on a blazer, grabbed my laptop, and headed out. When I arrived, Javier was already there, hunched over his laptop, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He looked up as I slid into the booth across from him, his eyes dark with worry. Without a word, he turned his screen toward me. "They've been moving assets, Alana. Not just consolidating accounts, but outright siphoning money into private trusts. Shell companies' offshore accounts. Your sister, your parents. They've been bleeding the company dry." I felt my heart skip a beat, my mind racing to connect the dots. "How long?" "Since last year. Right around the time you went on medical leave." He pulled up a chart, each line a digital knife to my heart. "Look at this. They've been hiding it through multiple channels, layering transactions to make it look like normal operating expenses. But if you know where to look, it's clear as day." I scanned the figures, my pulse pounding in my ears. They had stripped me of my title, my status, and now they were gutting the company I had helped build from the ground up. I felt a familiar anger rise hot and bitter, but I forced it down, focusing instead on the opportunity this betrayal presented. "They think I'm out," I whispered, my eyes narrowing as I leaned closer. But they forgot one thing. Javier's eyes met mine, a hint of hope flickering in his tired gaze. "What's that?" "I still own a quarter of this company." I leaned back, a slow, predatory smile spreading across my lips, "and they can't touch it without my consent." Javier's eyebrows shot up. "They tried to bury you, but you're still in the game." I nodded, the pieces falling into place in my mind. "They've built their empire on my back, and they can't legally shut me out without my resignation." I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a whisper. "Which means I still have leverage." Javier leaned back, a slow grin breaking through his stress. "They're going to regret this." "Oh, they already do," I said, standing up and grabbing my bag. "Now we just have to make them realize it." That night I went home and started drafting the first wave of my counterattack. I sent a few well-placed emails, quietly pulling in some old contacts I hadn't spoken to in years. Lawyers, PR experts, even a few forensic accountants I knew from my startup days. I wasn't just going to take back my position, I was going to dismantle their house of cards piece by piece. By midnight, I had assembled a digital war chest of evidence, copies of emails, transaction logs, even a few voice memos I had dug up from my old phone backups. My fingers trembled as I hit save on the final document, labeling the folder Phoenix. I leaned back, the cool leather of my office chair grounding me as I stared at the screen. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of control, of power. They had pushed me to the edge, but they had forgotten one critical fact. I don't break. As I shut my laptop, my phone buzzed again. It was a message from Javier. "I just got a call from HR. They're trying to erase your digital footprint from the company servers. They've already started scrubbing your emails." I clenched my jaw, my pulse spiking. They were trying to erase my legacy, to rewrite history without me. I fired back a quick reply. "Let them try." Then I stood, walked to my window, and stared out over the dark city skyline. They thought this was over. They thought they had won. They had no idea who they were dealing with. The next morning, I woke up to a series of frantic texts from Javier. "Javier, they're escalating. I just got called into a meeting with Serena and your parents. They're moving fast." "Javier, they've called in the IT department. They're scrubbing everything, Javier. You need to move now." I felt my pulse quicken, my mind racing. They were getting desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. I grabbed my laptop, sat down at the kitchen table, and opened the folder. I had labeled Phoenix. I needed to get ahead of them. I called my lawyer Sam, a sharp-tongued former prosecutor I had met through a mutual friend years ago. He picked up on the second ring. "Alana." "What's up?" he said, his tone curious but wary. "I need a crash course in corporate warfare," I replied, leaning forward as I opened my notes. "And I need it now." Sam chuckled, but I could hear the concern creeping into his voice. All right, lay it on me. I spent the next hour walking him through what I had found: the offshore accounts, the hidden trusts, the falsified board minutes. He interrupted only a few times, mostly to mutter a few choice words about my family's audacity. When I finished, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. Alana, he said slowly, his tone darker than I had ever heard it. This is big. If half of what you're saying is true, you're sitting on a corporate nuke. Exactly, I replied. My voice cold and sharp, and I need to figure out how to detonate it without blowing myself up in the process. He was silent for a moment, and I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. All right, first things first, we need to secure your position. If they're trying to erase you, we need to make sure your 25% stake is protected. I nodded, already typing out notes. Agreed? What do you need from me? Proof paper, trails, digital logs, anything that shows you're still a legitimate part owner. And we need to lock down your voting rights before they try to freeze you out. I've got that, I replied, my fingers flying across the keyboard as I pulled up the original partnership agreement. What else? We need to hit them where it hurts their credibility. If they've been funneling money, we need to expose it publicly if necessary. That means financial audits, whistleblower filings, maybe even a few quiet leaks to the press. I felt a wicked grin spread across my face. I can handle that. And Alana, he added, his voice dropping to a more serious tone. Don't underestimate them. They're cornered and cornered. People are dangerous. I let that hang in the air for a moment, the reality of what I was about to do settling in. I know, I said, finally, my voice firm, but they made one critical mistake. What's that? They underestimated me. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, encrypted emails, and sleepless nights. I looped Javier in setting up a secure Dropbox where he could upload financial files without tipping off the IT department. I even reached out to a few old friends in the media, planting the seeds for a story that would hit them where it hurt their reputation. Then, one night, as I was sifting through yet another stack of financial records, I found it. The smoking gun. It was a series of wire transfers small enough to avoid immediate suspicion, but significant when viewed together. They had been funneling money into a series of shell companies, all registered to a holding firm in the Cayman Islands, a firm my sister Serena had established under a pseudonym. I felt my pulse spike, my hands trembling as I pulled up the incorporation documents. It was all there: her signature, her initials, the date of formation. They had been using my silence, my loyalty, to bleed the company dry. I leaned back in my chair, my mind racing. I had enough to bury them, to tear down the empire they had tried to build on my back. I hit the print button, watching the pages slide out of the printer. Each one a small victory. I stacked them neatly, placed them in a manila envelope, and wrote a single word on the front: proof. I stared at the envelope for a long moment, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it, my first strike. I grabbed my phone, fired off a quick message to Javier: meet me tomorrow. It's time. The next morning, I met him at the same coffee shop, the place where this all began. He looked tired, the dark circles under his eyes deeper than ever. But when I slid the envelope across the table, his eyes sparked with something I hadn't seen in a while: hope. He opened it, his eyes scanning the pages, his lips moving as he read the damning evidence. When he finally looked up, his expression was a mix of shock and admiration. This is it, Alana," he whispered, his hands shaking slightly as he clutched the envelope. "You can bury them with this." I leaned back, my own hands steady for the first time in days. Good. Because that's exactly what I intend to do. The next morning, I took a deep breath and hit send on a series of carefully crafted emails. Each one contained a fragment of the truth I had uncovered, sent to a select group of shareholders, former clients, and even a few industry journalists. I knew would smell blood in the water. The subject line was simple: for your eyes only. Martial dynamics. Truth. Then I called Sam. "Is it done?" he asked, his voice tight with anticipation. "It's done," I replied, leaning back in my chair as the first replies started pinging in. "Good," he said, his tone shifting to something darker. "Now we wait." I didn't have to wait long. By noon, the first cracks in their facade started to show. My phone lit up with text messages, missed calls, and even a few frantic voicemails from my parents, Serena, though was silent. She knew better than to call me directly. She was too proud, too convinced of her own superiority to admit she had miscalculated. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my balcony watching the Houston skyline as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the buildings in shades of gold and crimson. I felt something I hadn't in a long time, satisfaction. Around 7 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I had a feeling I knew who it was. "Hello," I answered, keeping my tone calm, almost bored. There was a long, heavy silence on the other end before a familiar voice cut through the static. "Alana." It was my father. His voice strained, the usual authoritative tone tinged with something closer to fear. "We need to talk." I took a slow sip of my wine, letting the silence stretch just long enough to remind him who was in control now. "I'm listening," I replied, my voice smooth and even. He hesitated clearly, unprepared for my calmness. "What are you doing? Why are you trying to tear this family apart?" I almost laughed. The audacity. The sheer unfiltered nerve of it. "Funny," I said, swirling my glass, watching the deep red liquid catch the fading light. "I could ask you the same thing. But I'm not the one funneling company funds into shell corporations, am I?" I heard his breath catch on the other end, a small, satisfying sound that told me I had hit my mark. "Alana, we can fix this," he said, his voice slipping into that patronizing tone he had perfected over the years, the one he used whenever he wanted me to clean up one of his messes. "Let's just sit down and talk this through." I leaned forward, setting my glass down carefully. "Oh, I'm sure you'd like that," I replied, my tone sharpening. "But the time for talking is over, Dad. I gave this family everything. My time, my health, my loyalty, and you threw me away like yesterday's garbage the moment I wasn't useful to you anymore." He started to say something, but I cut him off. "I have the documents," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I have the emails, the bank records, the shell company paperwork. I have enough to bury you and Serena for good." Another long, painful silence. I could almost hear him struggling to come up with a counter, some way to manipulate me back into my old role as the loyal daughter. The silent workhorse. "I don't know what you think you have, but this will destroy everything we've built," he finally said, his voice hardening, the fear giving way to anger. I smiled, leaning back into my chair. "No, Dad," I said, my tone dripping with satisfaction. "It'll destroy everything you've built, and you only have yourselves to blame." Before he could respond, I hung up, tossing my phone onto the table and draining the last of my wine. The next morning, I woke to a storm. Not the kind outside my window, but the kind I had unleashed within my family. The emails I had sent out had started to bear fruit. Industry blogs were buzzing. Old clients were asking questions, and even a few shareholders had reached out to Javier demanding explanations. Then, just before noon, my phone rang again. This time it was Serena. I let it ring twice before answering. "Serena," I said, letting her name hang in the air like a challenge. "Alana," she replied, her voice tight like she was biting down on her own rage. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I leaned back, propping my feet up on my desk as I took a deep breath, savoring the moment. "I'm just making sure the truth gets out. You should try it sometime." There was a long, furious silence on the other end, and I imagined her pacing her penthouse office, her perfectly polished nails digging into her palms as she tried to maintain control. "You're going to regret this," she finally hissed, her voice trembling. "You have no idea what you're up against." I smiled, the kind of slow, predatory grin that comes from knowing you've just cornered your prey. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm up against," I replied, my voice dripping with satisfaction. "The question is, do you?" I hung up before she could respond, letting the silence ring in my ears like a victory bell. That night, as I sat on my balcony again, the cool night air wrapping around me like a comforting blanket, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. They had tried to erase me, to silence me, to bury me, but I had clawed my way back piece by piece, and I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. The morning after my call with Serena, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing non-stop. I squinted at the screen, my eyes still adjusting to the sunlight streaming through my bedroom window. 25 missed calls. 18 new messages. I swiped through the notifications, each one more frantic than the last. My father. My mother. Even a few board members who had once treated me like an afterthought were suddenly desperate to reach me. I tossed my phone aside and stretched a slow, satisfying motion that felt like shedding an old skin. I had them exactly where I wanted them, panicking, scrambling to cover their tracks. Then, as if on cue, my laptop pinged. I grabbed it from my bedside table, my heart skipping a beat as I read the subject line of the new email. "Notice of emergency board meeting. Urgent." I chuckled, swinging my legs over the side of the bed. They were desperate, cornered. I could almost smell the fear in the neatly worded corporate language of the email. "Dear shareholders, In light of recent developments, an emergency board meeting has been scheduled to address the current financial and structural concerns at Marshall Dynamics. Your attendance is strongly encouraged. Date tomorrow, 9:00 a.m. Location: Marshall Dynamics HQ, Main Conference Room. Best Serena Marshall, CEO. Marshall Dynamics. I closed the laptop and leaned back against the headboard, a slow grin spreading across my face. They wanted to confront me, to pressure me into silence, to make me feel small again. They had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I dressed carefully, choosing a sharp charcoal gray pantsuit that cut clean lines and exuded power. I pinned back. My hair slipped on my favorite pair of black heels and grabbed my leather portfolio, freshly stuffed with every damning piece of evidence I had gathered over the past few weeks. As I pulled into the company parking lot, I felt a strange, almost nostalgic sense of calm. It had been weeks since I had walked through these glass doors, weeks since my family had tried to erase me. The receptionist's eyes widened as I approached her, fingers hovering uncertainly over the phone, probably debating whether to call security. I gave her a tight, knowing smile as I breezed past her, my heels clicking sharply against the polished marble floors. The conference room was already packed when I entered. My father sat at the head of the table, his jaw set, his eyes hard. Serena stood beside him, her hands gripping the back of his chair so tightly, her knuckles had turned white. The rest of the board members looked up as I walked in, their expressions ranging from shock to thinly veiled fear. I took a seat at the far end of the table, slowly opening my portfolio and laying out the neatly organized documents. Each one a small paper-thin dagger aimed at the heart of their empire. My father cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure. Alana, he began, his voice carefully controlled. We've called this meeting to discuss the recent disruptions you've caused. I arched an eyebrow, leaning back in my chair. Disruptions? I echoed, my voice calm, almost amused. Interesting choice of words. Serena's eyes narrowed, her jaw tightening as she leaned forward. You've put this company at risk, Alana. Your reckless actions have jeopardized everything we've built. I smiled, folding my hands neatly on the table. You mean the empire you tried to steal out from under me? A ripple of unease passed through the room, a few of the more skittish board members exchanging nervous glances. I have every right to protect my 25% stake. I continued, my voice sharpening. And as a founding partner, I have a legal obligation to ensure the financial stability of this company, something you and our dear father seem to have forgotten. Serena's eyes flashed, her polished veneer cracking for the first time. You don't know what you're talking about. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on hers. Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about. I know about the shell companies, the offshore accounts, the falsified board minutes. I know about the millions you siphoned off while I was on medical leave. Her face paled, a slight tremor running through her hands as she gripped the chair even tighter. I have the documents to prove it, I added, sliding a neatly labeled folder across the table. And if you think for a second that I won't use them, then you clearly don't know me as well as you thought. My father's jaw tightened, his eyes darting nervously between me and Serena. He reached for the folder, flipping it open with a sharp snap, his eyes scanning the damning evidence I had so carefully collected. A few of the other board members leaned in, their faces growing more alarmed with each passing second. This is a misunderstanding, my father stammered, his voice cracking under the pressure. We can resolve this. Alana, we're family. I let out a bitter laugh, leaning back in my chair. Family? I repeated, my tone dripping with disdain. Family doesn't stab each other in the back. Family doesn't erase each other from the company they helped build. Family doesn't treat each other like disposable assets. The room fell into a stunned silence, the air crackling with tension. I stood slowly, gathering my papers and slipping them back into my portfolio. I'll give you 48 hours to resign, both of you, I said, my voice low and deadly calm. Or I take this public. I watched their faces pale, the carefully constructed masks of power and control crumbling before my eyes. Think it over, I added, turning on my heel and striding toward the door. And remember, I'm not the one who started this war, but I will damn well finish it. I didn't look back as I stepped into the hallway, my heels clicking with each determined step. They thought they could erase me. They thought they could silence me. But they had underestimated the one thing they should have feared from the start. My resolve story. 2. Hello, my name is Aurelia. I quietly believed that love required sacrifice, so for years I paid every bill, every medical bill, and every holiday dinner. However, one afternoon when my husband and son and I got home, Our belongings were thrown out like trash on the porch. We voted. They said, "You're gone." The same family that I carried fed and clothed erased me as if I had never existed. However, they were unaware that I kept all of my receipts, transfers, and lies. Tell me what time it is where you are in the comments section before we start. Have you ever experienced feelings of alienation within your own family? I read each one. By the time I parked along the curb, the house was already buzzing from the pavement. Warm light was streaming in from the windows of the dining room, silhouettes shifting in and out. I paused. In the back seat, fingers resting on the door handle. Milo's head tilted against his booster. He had fallen asleep during the drive, one hand still clutching the little Lego man he brought everywhere. I didn't want to wake him. I also didn't want to walk in without him. I shook his shoulder gently. "Hey, bud, we're here." He blinked, rubbing his eyes. "Are they making cake?" I smiled, even though I already knew the answer was probably no. Maybe. We stepped onto the porch together. I balanced the casserole dish in one hand, adjusted the strap on my bag with the other. My husband Dorian had offered to come, but I told him to rest. He'd been working double shifts all week. I figured naively that bringing Milo might soften the edges. "Marlena?" My mother opened the door before we knocked. "Aurelia," she said, voice just polite enough. "You're a few minutes late?" "I brought the garlic casserole you like," I replied. She didn't acknowledge the dish. Her eyes dropped to Milo, then flicked past us toward the street. "She's off at the entry." Inside, the smell of baked ziti and lemon cleaner clung to the air. The dining room table gleamed 6 places set with polished silverware and napkins, folded like fans. I scanned the table twice. No seat for Milo, not even a stool from the kitchen. "I guess he can sit with me," I said gently. I placed my casserole down and pulled my chair back, lifting Milo into my lap. "He's older." My elder sister glanced up from her phone. "You're going to let him eat off your plate. That's charming, I'll make it work." Dinner began the way all our dinners did. Stiff grins, clinks of silverware, conversation about safe stuff, weather, church festivities, the price of eggs. I sipped water and tried to keep my breathing normal. Milo went for noodles with his small fork, knocking over a breadstick. No one provided a napkin. Midway through the lunch, Isolde stood. She carried a cream envelope. "Mom, here's a little something from my bonus. I figured you would find it useful." With shining eyes, Melina seized it with both hands. "You're quite considerate." "It has always been." I chewed more slowly. "I sent Mom $500 via the bank app just 2 days ago." She had phoned in tears over her escalating utility bill and auto repairs. She hadn't expressed gratitude. They either didn't see it or claimed not to. Even though my name was clearly visible on the transfer receipt, I remained silent. The discussion veered off topic, pointing to the dish, Melina said. "Aurelia, is this yours?" I gave a nod. "Pasta still doesn't boil for her," she exclaimed. Bless her heart, loud enough for everyone at the table to hear. "It's old and it laughed too quickly." My dad even laughed. Milo raised his head, furrowed brows. "However, I enjoy it." I put a hand on his shoulder. "It's all right, sweetie. Next time I'll make a greater effort," I said, slow and acidic, steady, the smile affixed like a badge inside something unspooled. My sister sent a message to someone later when we were having dessert. As she scrolled by me and headed into the kitchen, I managed to catch a peek of it. For a moment, the screen sprang to life. That night, after I had put Milo to bed at home and used robotic hands to wash the dishes, she was still making an effort. The kitchen table was where I sat. I had used freelance work and stretched paychecks to purchase the identical table for our apartment. I gazed at the casserole remaining in its Tupperware container, still in good condition, unaltered. I finally got it that night when I looked at my son's empty plate. I wasn't just ignored. They eliminated me. That night, I didn't get much sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined Milo without a plate sitting on my lap. I witnessed the smug little jab Isolde sent while posing as private, as well as my son's expression when he recognized that I was being laughed at. The sky was clear and there was a little wind on Saturday afternoon. What do Ohioans prefer to refer to as a perfect spring day? Just to get out of the house, Dorian had suggested a last-minute weekend trip, he added. I concurred, mostly to provide Milo with something new. even if it was only a modestly priced Airbnb outside of town with a playground close by. Milo held a rumpled sketch he had done that morning and hummed to himself while sitting in the back car on the way back. He smiled and said, "I'm going to show Grandma. She will adore the hues." Through the rearview mirror, I gave him a smile. "Baby, she'll enjoy it. You put forth a lot of effort." Across the console, Dorian grabbed for my hand and gave it a single punctuation-like squeeze. On the drive, he spoke very little. After such family gatherings, he seldom did. We turned onto my parents' street, and I believe the quiet was his coping mechanism. I felt my stomach churn as I looked up from my phone. Our belongings were arranged in a row on the porch with plastic trash bags drooping at the corners. A box containing my old laptop and its chargers, Milo's toy basket partially open, and a plush dinosaur sticking out as if it were trying to get away. Milo narrowed his eyes. "Is that our stuff, Mom?" I didn't respond. I parked carefully and got out with heavy, tight legs. With my pulse pounding, I approached the porch and knocked twice. His face was visible through the little opening as the door creaked open an inch. Her face was unreadable, nor warm nor furious, but determined. Calmly, as though reading from a script, she continued. "It's time you stood alone, Aurelia. We discussed this. We didn't." Blinking behind her, I said, "Zolda showed up." Her arms were folded over her chest. "You've spent too much time here. It isn't intimate. We cast our votes?" My voice broke. "What are you?" "Most agreed that the time had come," she went on. "We must set priorities. Stability, stability." Once I chuckled. "Empty. You're referring to your comfort. Close the door a bit more." "Melina, don't make this more difficult, please." Then it made sense. It buzzed on my phone. I took it out, trembling hands. My cousin sent me a message. Attached is a screenshot. A group chat with family. I had never entered. We're all in agreement. She must leave. Don't take too long. She's tired of waiting. She isn't even doing her share of the work. It's depressing. Next is Solda. I'll take care of it. Be normal around her. My eyes became blurry from staring at the computer. Dorian was now reading over my shoulder as he stood next to me. This was planned. "Quietly?" he asked. "No," I muttered. They carried it out behind us. Milo gripped his wide-open, sketching eyes. Was I wrong? I knelt down and wiped my face. "No, dear, not you." He turned to face the porch. "How come they won't allow us in?" I was unable to respond to that one. We packed the car as full as we could. We would return for the remainder. It wasn't until we stopped into a dilapidated hotel at a petrol station on the outside that I started crying. Under the surface, the room smelled like mildew and something older, like lemon air freshener. Milo was already falling asleep as he cuddled up on the bed next to me. Sitting in the corner, Dorian silently scrolled through his phone. I launched the conversation for the family group. Every name that had previously referred to me as a niece, cousin, or daughter was scrolled past. I went over each message one more. Allow them to see me. I then removed it. Later that evening, I realized I couldn't continue to lie as I glanced at my kid who was sleeping next to me in the motel bed. That night, I didn't get much sleep. The air is too dry and the cushions at motels are usually too flat. The quiet was too loud, with the gentle cadence of a youngster who hadn't quite processed the gravity of what had transpired. Milo laid next to me, his chest rising and falling. In the little light coming in through the curtains, I saw him trace the contour of his face. I used to think that I was doing all of this for him. But when I saw our bags arranged like a yard sale special, something inside of me changed. I knew I couldn't remain numb, but by morning I hadn't decided. There was a little scent of bleach and stale coffee in the room. Silently, I got out of bed and put on a sweater and pants. The person at the front desk informed me about a diner 2 streets away, which is below. I sent my friend Tanya a text to ask if Milo could stay at her house for a longer sleep. She answered right away. Of course, spend as much time as you require in the cafe. I picked a window-facing seat. Across the street, the courthouse towered, its hefty stone front more recognizable than I wanted to acknowledge. With a trembling palm, I mixed milk into my coffee. Dorian appeared to have just rolled out of his own remorse when he arrived 5 minutes late. He had just had a quick shower and his hair was still wet. He untucked his shirt beneath his jacket. He sat down and said, "Hey," not looking me in the eye. I wasted no time. Have they ever shown me respect? He blinked, taken by surprise. What? My relatives. Your household. Everyone, have they ever shown me respect? His gaze strayed to the window as he gently breathed. Aurelia? They are outdated. They have certain expectations. Your mother is like that, you know. It wasn't her intention. I don't want to know what they meant. I cut you off. I want to know what you think. A brief delay allowed the gentle clink of dishes behind the counter to be heard. I just don't think it's worth hanging on to. Let it go, babe, he replied after taking a drink of his coffee, as if it were an unjustified resentment. Let it go. Similar to the years I raised my own children while watching other people's children, I was preparing meals for a table that would only ever roll their noses at it. It didn't mean anything to wire money behind closed doors while someone else took the bow. Quieter this time, I tried again. Are you even able to hear yourself? I was removed from the chat room of my own family. Like decaying fruit. They voted me out. He placed his hand on mine after reaching across the table. I'm not attempting to pick a side. Perhaps it's time for us to take center stage. I withdrew my hand. It's funny. All this time you've been thinking about them. He didn't dispute it, but his jaw tightened. Last Thanksgiving, I had a flashback when Isolde learned that I was making fitness videos online. She burst out laughing in front of everyone. Whoa, what a surprise. Currently a content producer. What comes next? You sell tea for the stomach. Mom remained silent. Continue chopping the turkey. That night, Dorian had patted my leg beneath the table. I never requested that gesture. Therefore, it's a silent apology pointless. On a cracked foundation, a band-aid. I got to my feet. He blinked. Where are you heading to stop pleading with others to pick me? I reached for my coat. The chilly air outside pricked my cheeks, but I didn't mind. I walked slowly across the street and paused at the courthouse steps. I didn't enter. I wasn't prepared. Not quite yet. However, with my hands deep in my pockets, I stood there gazing at those gray stone columns. I had been waiting for a letter, a text, or a crumb of recognition for years. However, as I stood there with the wind pulling at my coat, I came to a simple yet terrible realization. I wasn't anticipating their arrival. I was anticipating my arrival. I'm waiting to be allowed to stop describing. Don't get smaller. Don't settle for anything less than the absolute minimum. I walked back toward the motel after turning around. It buzzed on my phone. I didn't look at it. Not quite yet. I was previously aware of the type of message it would include. The previous night, I slept very little. I had read the message 100 times. My name spelled incorrectly beneath an award I was unaware was being granted. The error wasn't what hurt. The reality was underneath it. It wasn't only erasing me. They were replacing me by name, action via action. A few of days went by. I stayed occupied largely for Milo. After spending a few nights at the hotel, we spent a few more nights with my buddy Danielle, pretending not to see the sympathy in her eyes. I accepted her offer of her sofa and her kind smiles. Then the invitation arrived. I got a text from Isolde. This Friday is the Reading Corner dedication for Nathan's class. He'll take the stage. I hoped Milo would enjoy it. Seeing you was out of the question. No affection. Only formality cloaked in duty. Even though I didn't intend to attend, I knew I couldn't say no when Milo overheard and grabbed my arm as his eyes were bright with anticipation. We headed to the school theater on Friday afternoon after I put his sketchpad and some snacks in my handbag. For Nathan, I brought a little wrapped book. Milo's favorite is The Wind in the Willows. We sneaked into the back row seats. Parents filled the auditorium with pride. The vibrant bulletin boards and polished flooring reverberate with the sound of conversation. I sat in silence. Wet palms, sleek and blue. Isolde stood in front, grinning as if she were from another planet. Then it took place. The principal cleared his throat as he took the microphone. Before we start, we would like to express our gratitude to a kind sponsor who helped make our new reading space a reality. Thank you so much, Mrs. Isolde. Greer. Cheers. Milo even gave me a clap before giving me a perplexed look. But wasn't that from your company, Mommy? I first didn't respond. I continued to clap gently and courteously as if my hands weren't burning. I leaned over and whispered. After that, giving too much might sometimes cause recipients to forget who provided it. He cocked his head. It's unfair. No, it wasn't. I looked at Isolde. She didn't turn her head, she actually gave me the tiniest shrug and a tight, knowing smile as if she were daring me to spoil the moment I didn't. For the ceremony, I stayed. When Nathan read 2 sentences on stage, Milo grinned. Like a well-trained extra in someone else's play, I grinned too. I didn't approach the family cluster after that. I immediately went outside and took a seat on a bench near the parking lot shaded by a tree. As the spring breeze rustled the paper, I saw Milo sketch a robot in his notebook. Zoe called later in the evening. Even when we were silent for a few weeks, she had a way of feeling things. After I gave her the essential details of what happened, she responded, "You sound tired." "I am, but not the sleep-fixing sort." She waited. She was always waiting. I used the family account to make the gift. I said that I didn't even put my name on it because I reasoned that perhaps she would take the credit if the outcome spoke for themselves. She does it every time. At that time, Zoe was silent. "Aurelia, you've been hoping they'll change into the person they never said they would be." I was stopped by what she said. She was being exact, not mean. "They can't see you, but it doesn't make you invisible," she went on. "You continue to stroll behind them, making you invisible." My hotel phone was warm in my fingers as I gazed out at the dark park beyond. I didn't weep because I had previously shed too many tears for those who didn't blink, not because it didn't hurt. "It's okay for you to cease following them," Zoe went on. "There is no change in their direction." I thanked you in a whisper and said, "I will give you another call shortly." Then long after the call was over, I sat still. Something had started to change within me. It wasn't rage no more, it was space, a cleansing of a new sort in my chest. Not to exact retribution for the air. I didn't require their gratitude. All I had to do was quit giving mine away to folks who wouldn't even recall that evening. I made my way back to our small room at the hotel, passing the vending machines and the front desk. Milo had already curled up, legs spread out as if only children could sleep. I sat on the side of the bed and tucked the blanket under his chin. I became aware of it at that point. A letter was tucked beneath the door. No name, with a tiny bit of blue ink in the corner. It was only folded once. It included a message that almost shattered me and 200 no-ones in banknotes. Milo was still curled up on the scratchy comforter when the morning sun peeked through the old hotel curtain, creating a faint stripe. I listened to the crinkle of paper beneath the door, but I was cautious not to disturb him. Still barefoot, I padded over and knelt down to get it. A simple white envelope, no address for return. There is no name within. There were 2 clean 20 notes and a handwritten message. "Anywhere I'd know. I hope this aids in your recovery. No animosity. No animosity." My chest constricted. In February alone, I had sent her 5 times that amount for shortages in utilities. Medicine is not covered. Additionally, rent groceries beforehand. School is back in session. Buying a backpack for a niece that I chose myself. I gazed at the banknotes in my hand as if they were about to pierce my flesh. The money wasn't the insult. It was in its insignificance. It was hardly a message of charity. It was a dismissal. I had already folded the envelope again and slipped it into the drawer under the Gideon Bible before Dorian woke up. Not everything was worthy of being maintained in plain sight. Dorian proposed that we have supper at Jenna's that night. Despite continually playing both sides, my cousin insisted on remaining impartial. "It might help you reconnect," he added. "Don't give up. Show them." I was too exhausted to remind him that I was the one who had never left, but I did say yes. Not for me, for Milo. He clutched a coloring piece he had created for his cousin Lila and was wearing a blouse with small dinosaur patterns on it. "When we arrive, may I present it to her?" From the rear seat, he inquired. "Naturally, my dear." As I brushed a crumb off my pants, I spoke. I made 3 changes before deciding on a simple yet clean look. The regular throng was at Jenna's house when we got there. They were overdressed for a weeknight, the wine was already flowing, and there was someone in the kitchen laughing too loudly. As we entered, Dorian squeezed my hand a little, but then I noticed how exquisitely the table was arranged. Each location has a place card. The name of Leela Jenna hadn't RSVP'd, but Marlon, her fiancé, was. However, no Aurelia, no Dorian, and no high chair. For Milo, of course. We were hovering when someone, possibly Jenna's husband, offered. "There is a bar stool in the kitchen if that's all right, but we didn't know you were coming." I answered, "No worries at all," and nodded and even grinned. We took the bar stool, but my throat was dry. Only one Dorian was standing behind me, with a gentle patience that made me hurt. Milo sat on my lap and nibbled at my plate. Layla graciously thanked Milo, opened his drawing and returned her attention to her iPad. Someone murmured, "So lucky to have Isolde," as the salad was passed around and the wine was poured. When you need her, she's always there, and I tasted blood after biting the inside of my cheek. It wasn't anger, something gentler, I thought. Sadder, like melting. I murmured to no one. If you've ever felt like background music at someone else's party, that seat meant something to you. I sat in the restroom at the motel, knees pulled to my chest, the fan running. Leaning against the door frame was Dorian. "Are you all right?" he inquired, crossed arms. My gaze was fixed on the tile. They could be correct. Perhaps I was only a stand-in. He let out a sigh. "You worry too much." The problem was that I was concerned about maintaining harmony, being kind, and showing up even when people didn't ask. Alternatively, when they hoped I wouldn't. I got up, brushed my legs, and turned to face the mirror. I then turned it down. Even yet. Perhaps it's time for me to stop attending events to which I was never really invited. I had hardly slept by the time sunshine came through the flimsy hotel drapes. My mind was still pacing the same mental hallway it had been using for weeks, even though my body had passed out hours earlier. Unanswered questions. I didn't intend to rehash those memories. Trying not to wake Milo, I rolled over. He had been brought to the hotel lobby by Dorian for a juice and waffle. I was alone for about half an hour. I got my laptop open. I clicked through employment boards because it somehow made me feel in charge. Not because I had anything pressing to accomplish. I saw it at that moment. Buried within a 2019 email chain is a forgotten folder. Please evaluate the draft of the subject line. Greer Estate. My breath caught. Like a wound in the first draft, I clicked the will. My grandfather's modest two-bedroom home in Bexley, where I used to maintain the grass every summer, had been bequeathed to me, and my name was prominently displayed next to the major beneficiary. A second document then surfaced only 6 months later. Same lawyer, same heading. However, my name was absent this time. Rather, it is outdated. It had been replaced by his name. I flicked back and forth between the two files without blinking. I could still clearly recall that season and how I had volunteered to assist with the cost of Grandpa's new oxygen apparatus. He had been so appreciative. However, Isolde abruptly started visiting his apartment more often a few weeks after I sent the money. Additionally, she always had pastries with her. Additionally, she had a friend from college who was also a state lawyer. I refrained from crying. Not now. I sent the documents to a former colleague who had attended paralegal school. Monica, I use a flash drive to back up them, just in case I even uploaded them to cloud storage when everything is taken away from you. Clarity is all that remains. And I got it at last. We received an invitation to my Aunt Elaine's for a family lunch later that day. Dorian demanded that we depart. He said it was only lunch. Perhaps that would make things more manageable. I could tell no one was thinking about smoothness. As soon as we entered the backyard, Isolde was already presiding over the grill, dressed more for a fashion brunch than a laid-back gathering. Lila, her daughter, opened a gift containing a brand new iPad in rose gold. Everyone in the table applauded. With wide eyes, Milo pulled at my hand. It appears to be the one we purchased. "Mom," he muttered. Narrowing my eyes, I moved forward and saw it still just adhered beneath the white Amazon tag. From our order from 2 months prior, Dorian had signed for that one. I got up, crossed the yard, carefully removed the iPad from Layla's grasp, and removed the tag. I raised it. I own this. Quiet. Only the singing of birds in the maple tree? Above, Isolde blinked. Her smile hardly moved. Oh, I assumed it was accidentally sent to our home. It must have been a long-term error. I turned and put the tablet back in the box. After saying that I didn't shout, I made no accusations. I didn't have to. I said enough with the quiet. I left in the air. That night, as Dorian browsed through his phone, Milo and I ate fries in the hotel room. He wasn't pressed by me. I didn't want to hear another justification for the complexity of families. Rather, I opened my laptop once more. I didn't click on any job postings this time. A blank video editor launched. Hello. I spoke to the voice on the camera. Calm, steady. If you are a mother who has carried burdens that no one ever recognized, it's for you. I had no expectations once I posted the video. Not at all. I convinced myself that it would only help me exercise clear my mind and perhaps get over the pain. However, communications began to arrive within hours. Since then, the wait has remained constant. I appreciate you saying it aloud. For all of us mothers who keep our composure in silence, you are speaking. On the hotel bed sometime between folding laundry and checking on Milo's snack crumbs, I discovered that I hadn't just clicked upload. I had a fuse lit. I went to a little cafe outside the library that morning to start working on my second film. Everything smelled like wet concrete and fresh starts because it had rained earlier. Dorian had some errands to go and Milo spent a few hours with a buddy. The day seemed bright for once. Then I heard it. She has an older voice. She was sitting with her back to the window tucked up in the corner behind me. I noticed her reflection in the glass, but I doubt she saw me. She stirred cream into her coffee as if the world owed her silence, and she was flawless as always, sharp and contemptuous. Her voice drifted. Of course, I used her money. She's too soft to fight back. Always has been. My fingers didn't shake when I reached inside my purse and tapped the voice memo app. I didn't look back. I didn't toss my coffee weep or gasp. I just captured 42 seconds of the unadulterated truth. That was sufficient. Dorian and I got to the charity event later that night. A week ago, I sent in my RSVP and even contributed 3 boxes of canned food. People were wearing their best shoes and grinning the widest at this tiny neighborhood gathering. My outfit was navy blue, easy tidy. We approached the check-in desk. Before she could say anything, the woman with the clipboard had an apologetic expression. I apologize for the absence of your name, however. Isolde Greer is mentioned as a gold contributor. She might be able to verify I did not stiffen my throat. It didn't burn my chest. I gave her the bags after giving her a single nod. Give her the limelight. Silently, I said I discovered better lighting. After saying that, I pivoted. The parking lot outside gleamed from the previous downpour. I touched the red arrow, opened my phone, and leaned against the vehicle. In less than a minute, the audio clip was posted. Notifications had begun by the time we arrived into the hotel parking DMs. In the comments, wonder if this is true. Others suggesting it was about time someone exposed her. Dorian looked over. You're not scared this'll blow up? I gave him a glance. Be calm. It's blown up already. All I'm doing is checking the fire scene. I didn't feel invisible for the first time in years. I didn't experience erasure. I had a sense of purpose. One of the canned items was still in Milo's hand when he fell asleep that night. A peach tin. He wouldn't let go. I opened my laptop, grinned, and gave him a forehead kiss. I would do another video tomorrow. I wasn't spiteful. Rather, I was tired of being background noise. I knew what was going to happen by the time the sun rose over Franklin County overnight. My email had turned into a battleground. Not from supporters, but from unidentified individuals, making unwarranted accusations. I was accused of being ungrateful, vindictive, and inheritance-hungry by screenshots, threads, and irate comments. A manipulated screenshot that I had previously emailed in a fit of rage saying, maybe I should just sue them all, was released by Isolde. It wasn't my intention. However, it was now weaponized, recaptured, and shared on Facebook under the Central Ohio Families United organization. In a matter of hours, it became viral. The timing was calculated. My films, particularly the one with her voice on tape, were just starting to get noticed. She had to strike the loudest first. Make me seem like the erratic sister who was constantly having problems. So I quietly got dressed. The blue shirt I wore at my grandfather's funeral was the one I chose. No earring hair comes back. I had no desire for pity. I wanted precision. The courthouse smelled of dust and ancient air conditioning. Although the room was small, it had all of the truths that no one ever desired spoken out loud. I entered holding the manila packet in my hand, and my lawyer, Janice. I didn't perspire. My throat remained open. I had already experienced the actual betrayal. All this was paperwork. Someone was already sitting. Sharp lipstick. Blazer is immaculate. A tight smile came to her face. Beside her sat Marlena, a pearl-encrusted woman. Years ago, I had assisted in choosing something for her anniversary. Our cousin Gina whispered as she leaned into the bench behind them when the hearing was called to order by the judge. Janice started. The will comes first. We displayed the 2019 draft, which named me as Grandpa's property's principal beneficiary. 6 months later, We showed the updated version without my name. With a timeline in hand, Janice spoke firmly, emphasizing the abrupt rise in his older's visits during Grandpa's last months frequently with her friend from the law office. The bank documents, silent transfers, food reimbursements, and silent school tuition payments followed. It's all mine. Next, the sound. When the clip started, I kept a close eye on Marlena. I used her. Of course, money is outdated. The room echoed with his voice. She is too weak to resist. Nobody made a move. Marlena appeared shaken as well. Then came my turn. From my suitcase, I grabbed the identical envelope Marlena had once placed under my motel door with $40 and a letter. Hope this helps? No animosity. I stepped to her calm and placed a blank check into it, in case you ever wish to return what I provided. I said loud enough for the room. Adjust for inflation. I turned to depart, but not before retrieving one final thing. The chair. The little wooden chair I used to feed Milo in. The one they claimed was part of the house I'd bought it. I had the receipt in my tote, cradled in my arms like a memory that only I had. I lifted it up and carried it out. Justice, according to some, is loud, but it is going away with the truth unaltered. They can't yell as loudly as that. As I opened the final box marked Milo Books, the sun streamed through my new apartment's east-facing windows. I put his favorite stories in order. Picture books that have dog ears. He placed his battered copy of The Very Hungry Caterpillar and The Talking Tractor on the little shelf next to his beanbag. For the first time in years, he was coloring a sunset while singing to himself in the adjacent room. There was no sense of unpacking into borrowed space. We were entitled to this location. I looked at my YouTube dashboard, which pulsed in the corner of the screen. 75,082 members. A figure, a low roar. Evidence that speaking up for oneself might have a greater impact than remaining silent for years. I knew it was her, without even looking, when the phone rang. Melina. I waited for voicemail to come in. I opened the transcript a little later. We simply were unaware. We assumed you would always be present. I gazed at those words as though they were a puzzle that I had finally figured out. They had no intention of regret. They intended to convey anticipation, a feeling of permanency out of place, as though my appearance had been an implicit promise all along. Like the second bedroom or the porch light. My fingers grazed the edge of something familiar in the drawer later that afternoon as I was organizing files. The envelope. The same one from weeks ago on the floor of the hotel. The main crease was now more noticeable and the borders of the paper had softened. I opened it without anything. For a long time I stood there, not upset or offended, just conscious. The last thing I ever gave them was that envelope. Not $40. My quiet. Not the years of late-night pickups or shifted deposits. My readiness to be silent in spaces that were happy to accept it. I replaced it in the drawer. I needed the reminder. Milo and I went to the corner park for our regular stroll that evening. The lingering gray of winter had finally started to fade in the spring. He skipped forward, pausing to pick at a dandelion patch. Then, like children, he asked a large question as if it were unimportant. Do you believe they will ever apologize? I took a while to respond. Rather, I gazed at the azure heavens between the trees, the same sky that covered every room where my voice had been muted, the courtroom and the house we departed. We're not waiting for it anymore, are we? Perhaps, I said, at last. Milo gave a nod, as if that were entirely logical. I sat on a seat close by and let the silence descend upon me as he went off to the swings. After his nightly ritual and another perusal of the giving tree, he returned home. I took a seat at my desk. I launched my laptop and started planning my channel's upcoming series. I called it Strong Starts for Silent Women, a Reclaim series. I carefully and deliberately typed everything, then saved the file on the chair I had stolen from my parents' house. Our chair, which I had used to feed Milo while he was still giggling and Cheeky was still in place. It didn't plead for a seat at their table anymore. Now it had a genuine one. What about the will? For days it remained unopened in my inbox. I didn't have to open it once again. A property, a name or a title that I had inherited myself had not been passed down to me. Justice isn't always about taking things back. It has to do with what you no longer choose to bear.